Hello, this is Dr. Mears. Today we are going to be graphing quadratics in standard form. And it is important to be able to graph quadratics not only by hand using our algebra skills and substitution, but also using the Desmos calculator. And it's also important to learn how to graph quadratics because if you go forth in your mathematical endeavors in college, you're going to need to know some methods such as substitution, calculation, using a formative. And if you seek out any fields that uses maths, you're going to need to know how to graph, especially by hand if you take any courses such as calculus, linear algebra, statistics. So graphing quadratics by hand is very important, and learning how to graph it using Desmos or any other calculator will also be helpful, definitely in checking to make sure that we're right. So let's go on to graph quadratics. So graphing a quadratic equation in standard form. In order to graph these three things we are going to be needing. The first thing are x-intercepts. Now we've actually been practicing the quadratic formula to get the x-intercepts. And so those are the first 2 points that we're going to need. One x-intercept here and one x-intercept here. Sometimes it might be over both on the negative side. Sometimes it might be on the positive side. We're going to look at that in a minute. Number 2, we're going to need the y-intercept. The y-intercept is where the parabola crosses the y-axis. So that's right here for this graph. It's also equal to the c. So whatever number our constant is, whatever number is c, that's where it intersects the y-axis. And lastly is going to be the vertex. This is the point xy. Either it's going to be a minimum or it could be a maximum if this was flipped over. And how do we find that? Well, first we have to find x using the axis of symmetry formula. That's this one, x equals negative b over 2a. Remember, this is the axis of symmetry, the imaginary line that cuts this parabola in half. So once we found that x number, we're going to substitute into the equation to find y. And we're going to be going over that. So hopefully 1 and 2, we have done before, you have seen it. But number 3, this is really where we're going to dive into. Now, before we actually start graphing and using our formulas, I do have to point out that there are different graphs to consider. So there are graphs that cross the x-axis twice, 1, 2. So this is one of the types of graphs that we're going to be looking at today. And let's see, right here. This is another graph that crosses 1, 2. And this is another graph that we're going to be looking at today. Now, there are some graphs that actually sit or touch the x-axis, which is this right here. This, you will see x is going to be the x-intercept. You're going to get that number twice. So you might see x equals -3, x equals -3. So this one and this one where it touches the x-axis, we'll be exploring those a little bit later. There's also ones that don't touch at all, such as this one here and this one here. These don't cross and they don't even touch the x-axis. We're actually going to be looking at one of these, and I believe it's going to, might be, I'm not sure which one. We'll have to wait and find out. However, these are going to be our focus ones for today, where we do have x-intercepts. They will be different. One will open down, one will open up. So let's get going. On the next slide that you have on the slide deck, I have created this little table for you. And in the table, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 examples. I actually added a 5th one down here, which you can add as well. And we're going to be finding the x-intercepts. Remember, that was the first step. The y-intercept, that was the second. The vertex. And then we're going to be doing like a sketch of the graph. So this is going to be a sketch. We're actually going to use Desmos to get the nice draw of the graph. So Desmos will draw the graph for you, and we're going just to be sketching it here. And so that's where I'm going to teach you how to use Desmos in addition to learning how to do it by hand. So where are we going to start? You're absolutely right. We're going to start doing it by hand. So this is the first one that I'm going to do. I'm going to do y equals x squared plus 3x plus 4. And I'm actually going to be switching to another piece of paper here so that we can do it all out together. And I'm not using that tiny little space. So if you would like to pause the video to run and get a piece of paper and a writing utensil, that would be really good to take some notes, or you can even just screenshot this after I'm done if you want and put it in your notes as well. So you can always add it to the slide deck as a picture. That would be really nice. So we need to graph this. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we need to find the x-intercept. So I moved my camera a little bit. So in order to find the x-intercepts, we are going to be using our x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we've been practicing this skill, and you should be pretty good at this skill. In this skill, we first have to pick out what our a, b, and c are. So here's a, here's b, and here's c. So a is going to be 1, b is going to be 3, and c is going to be negative 4. And you know I like to write them all out so I can just put them in the formula. So now let's put them in the formula, opposite of b, so negative 3 plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And remember, I like to put all of my numbers here, especially the ones with the negatives, in parentheses. All right, so let's go and do this. I instructed you now when you did the quadratic formula to break it out into 2 problems. One where you have the plus all over, and I multiply that out. 2 times 1 is 2, and one where you have the minus. And so in your calculator, you are to do this first numerator. The numerator, this is first, that's the first step, and then you divide. So here you will receive, I believe it's going to be, well, let's do it together. So negative 3 plus second square root. We're going to put it in just like we see it. If you don't remember how to do this, or you missed this lesson, please go to my video where I do this exactly like I'm doing now, and you can get a good review. Oops, you can see that. There we go. Sorry, the light is a little tricky today. So it's going to be 2, and we have to remember that we are going to divide that by 2. So our first intercept is x equals 1. And now how we write that as an intercept is 1, 0. That is the point on the x-axis where our parabola will cross. This one here, x equals, we are actually going to be getting, let's do it in the calculator. Negative 3 minus second square root 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. Enter, and we get negative 8. Negative 8, don't forget to divide it by 2, so we're going to get negative 4. How we write that as the point where it crosses the x-axis is negative 4, 0. So now we know where it's going to cross the x-axis. That was the first thing that we need to get. So in your table, why don't you go fill out x-intercept and fill out 1, 0 and negative 4, 0. Okay, the next thing that we're going to need, number 2, is going to be our y-intercept. And our y-intercept is y equals c. So whatever that c number was, let's go back and look. C was negative 4. So it's going to cross the y-intercept at negative 4. And we're going to denote that as 0, negative 4. So notice when it crosses the x-intercept, y is 0. When it crosses the x-intercept, y is 0. When it crosses the y-intercept, x is 0. So just to point that out, a little review of x and y intercepts. So we have our x-intercept, we have our y-intercept. The next thing that we're going to need is going to be our vertex. So number 3 is our vertex. And in our vertex, we're going to have to first find x. Here is the formula, negative b over 2a. That is to find the axis of symmetry. And so we're going to have to use our b, which was again 3, and we're going to have to use our a, which was 1. So let's put those in here. X equals negative 3 over 2 times 1. So x equals negative 1.5. Decimals are absolutely fine here. We are not going to be drawing this by hand. It's tough if you have graph paper, then you can. However, we are going to have Desmos graph this. It's just important to show you how to do this by hand. And then if you had graph paper, it would just be plotting points. So here's the x point of that vertex. Now what we have to do is we have to go back to this original equation and write it down. Y equals x squared plus 3x minus 4. And we are going to have to input our x value into x to get our y value. So we're going to do y equals 1.5 squared plus 3 times 1.5 minus 4. And I'm actually just going to write that down here. Y equals, and we can do this in the calculator. This can be done just like that in the calculator. So we're just going to put, and I'll clear this out, parentheses 1.5 squared plus 3 times 1.5. And notice I'm using, notice I'm using parentheses as my multiplication minus 4. Enter. 2.75. 2.75. So now this is the vertex. This is going to be the point where it intersects, where it either is a maximum or a minimum. So here is my vertex. So I have all these nice points. I have where it intersects the x, I have where it intersects the y, and I have either that maximum or minimum point. So let's go. If you had a piece of graph paper, then you would write out your scales. However, I am going to be sharing my screen and I'm going to be bringing you to Desmos. And in Desmos, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be graphing it and we're going to be checking to make sure that everything is correct. So let me share my screen right now with you. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So if you go to Desmos and you go to graphing calculator, this is what you're going to find. And what you could do is put in y equals x squared, making sure you get out of that square position, plus 3x minus 4. Beautiful. And it shows up right there. So let's look here. Let's just investigate. If we hover over the point, the first x-intercept, we see -4. We got that, -4. If we hover over the second, it should be +1. We got that, +1. Let's go down to our y-intercept, -4. We got that down here. It said -4. Just moving my paper down so you can see it. And let's look at that vertex. We see that we have a minimum at -1.5. And ooh, I made a mistake here. I wonder what happened because I did make a mistake. I put in, let's see, I put in my it's a -1.5. So back over here in my work, I put in +1.5, but it's a -1.5. And I'm glad I made that mistake. You know, failure in mathematics helps us to learn and to be more specific in our work. So let's go back and recalculate this with that -1.5 early in the morning, everybody. So I did +1.5 by accident. Let's put in a -1.5. Let's square it. And then let's do +3 times -1.5 minus 4. So math teachers do make mistakes. We see we have a -6.25. So let's just correct that on our paper, -6.25. And we see that that is a minimum. So I'm just going to put min here. And that was great that I was able to use Desmos. I was able to see that I made a mistake, and now I'm able to correct it. So let's go back to our chart and let's fill out all of our information and do a little sketch. So here's this. Okay. I will stop sharing screen so that we can just fill in our information here. So we're going to fill in the x-intercepts, fill in the y-intercept, fill in our vertex. Notice I keep missing my negatives today. And then let's just do a sketch. And on a sketch, you don't have to put numbers in. You could just label everything 1, 0, -4, 0, -4, and then we can just put -1.5 and 6, -6.25. So you can just go through and label everything. A little messy, but you know what? I only gave you a little box to do it. So, all right, I would like you to try y equals 5x plus 2 and y equals 0.2x, this one. These two. Try these two to see what we get. Try to find the intercepts, pause it, and then definitely come back to me. All right, welcome back. So for your y equals 5x plus 2, this is what I got. So I got our x-intercepts 0.6430 and -1.240. My y-intercept was -4. My vertex was -0.3 and -4.45. And then here's my graph. I see that it opens up. It has a minimum. I didn't fill everything in. It got a little messy. But let's check this right now on Desmos. Let's go through and see if we got all of our information correct. So in sharing screen, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave this graph here because you'll notice that I'm planning on showing you something else. There's a magic trick here. So y equals 5x squared plus 3x minus 4. Ooh. So let's look at this little magic trick that we have here. So I'm hoping that you're noticing we have plus 3x minus 4, plus 3x minus 4 in both of these. We also have our x squared. That's what makes it quadratic. Now in this one right here, this was 1x squared. Doesn't change because the 1 likes to hide. This one, we went from the red, notice, red, the red one, to the blue. And what we changed was the number in front of the x, this coefficient. We actually went bigger. We went from 1 to 5. Well, when we go from 1 to 5, what happens to the graph? That's right. It got narrow. So you know what? I'm just going to put on my paper right here, narrow. So I'm wondering if we went to 10, if we change that to 10 or 20 or 30, how narrow that would really get. All right, the next one let's check everything. So let's check everything. Okay, first, let's check this. All right, let's see, we got negative 1.24. Got it, good. We got positive 0.643, great. Y-intercept of -4, that should be the same because the C is the same. Let's check our y-intercept, -0.3 and -4.45. Excellent. All right, let's try that next one. The 0.2. So let's go here. Our next graph is y equals 0.2x. So now what's happening to that coefficient in front of x? You're right. Now we're going smaller. Now it's a decimal. The 3x minus 4 stays the same, as you can see all the way down. But now we're going from 5 to 0.2. And where did I mess up here? 3x because I didn't mess up. Look at this one. So it looks like it's a line, right? I was like, oh no, I messed up. It looks like it's a line. Let's zoom out. So you push this little minus sign. Wow, look what happens when we zoom out. Look how wide. This is huge. So once we went from 5 to 0.2, we went from that blue to the green one. This got super wide. I'm actually going to write that on my paper, wide. I wonder if we even got that number to be lower, like 0.002, how wide that would get. Let's check our numbers. -16.2, that's good. Let's see, 1.23, perfect. Our y-intercept should be -4, excellent. And let's check our vertex right here, -7.5 and -15.25. And if you want more practice on this vertex, I am going to give it to you, but I also could do a live lesson for you. So please make sure that you do chat box me if you do want live lesson, kind of want to practice it in class. All right. Now what I would like you to try is going to be this one. And I'm actually going to do it with you right now. And notice I didn't put a graph there. So on this paper, y equals -x squared plus 3x minus 4. And here's a is -1, B is 3, and C is -4. Let's just go through and find our x-intercepts. So separating it out, all over -2. There's that first one. And here's that second one. All over -2. Okay, let's first try this one in the calculator. And I'm just going to remember put divided by 2. So we're going to clear it out. So it's going to be -3 plus second. Can you see it okay? Nope. Second square root of, let's see, b squared minus 4 times. There we go. I want you to notice there's this I right here. This is an imaginary number. When we have an imaginary number like this, we're not going to see it cross the x-axis. Even if I divided this by -2, that wouldn't change the fact that it was an imaginary number. So we got -3 plus 2.65i, and then we got 1.5 minus 1.32i. Now, I'm not going to be going over imaginary numbers today, but I do want you to see, if you do get this little I, what the graph looks like on our coordinate plane. You know, what happens? We know it's not going to be, we're not going to visually see it cross. So let's do that one here. Y equals -x squared plus x. Okay, so here you have the purple one. We still have the y-intercept as -4. We still could find our vertex. So our vertex, and here I put that 1.5 and -1.75. So just because we don't see it cross the x-axis, it doesn't have any, there's no x-intercepts. We still have a y-intercept and we still have a vertex. So now I'm going to sketch this out. And in sketches, it is nice to label the points, and here's a little sketch. I would label it, but my box is a little bit small. But I just wanted you to see what happens and what happens when we don't get any x-intercepts. What does that look like? And what does the graph look like when we graph it? And I also want you to notice that we now have a -1. And the negative here flipped it over. So all of these were positive, +1, +5, +0.2. Now we're at negative. And so we all went from opening up to opening down. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Lastly, I have for you is just one where it does open down right here. It is a -b. And I wanted you to try this and practice this. So here are the answers. So try to find the x and y intercept. Try to find the vertex, and please do a sketch. You can also do this on Desmos for yourself, but this is kind of just a practice problem for you to move on to right now. Let me take these papers away. So pause, give it a try, come back for the answers. Now, you will also notice that I have a practice slide for your next slide. And on your paper, using a writing tool, draw each graph, or if you don't have any graph paper, then you can sketch it. When you sketch the graph, make sure you label important parts, label the x-intercepts, label the y-intercept, label the vertex. But if you want to draw it, then you are going to need graph paper, and you are going to have to put, and you're going to need to put a nice scale on there. So that's the difference between, in IB, there is a difference between drawing it and sketching it. And you can also check with Desmos. Check to see if you got the answers right with Desmos. So give these a try. And you will also notice you can pause it here if you want to write them down. If you are not in my class and you're watching this, I thank you very much. The answers I also included on the next slide, and the answers for each graph. So this has been graphing quadratic equations by hand, sketching them, and also using Desmos to check our answers and check out, making sure where our x-intercepts, our y-intercepts, and our vertex are. Hope this helped. See you soon.